Welcome to the Unstressed Exec, the podcast where we dive deep into the real conversations that help you lead, love, and live with greater clarity, courage, and calm. I'm your host, Dr. George Vergolius, executive coach and clinical forensic psychologist, and I help high-achieving professionals navigate life transitions, resolve conflict with confidence, and build unshakable psychological resilience. So if you're ready to lead with purpose, master conflict with grace, and become more emotionally agile under pressure, you're in the right place. Let's get started. Welcome back to the Unstressed Exec. I'm your host, Dr. George Vergolius, executive and resilience coach, forensic psychologist, and someone who works every day with high performers navigating some of the most emotionally charged transitions of their lives. Today, we begin a 4-part series, The Beginner's Guide to Navigating Separation and Divorce. This isn't your typical advice column. It's not about legal checklists or courtroom drama. It's about the internal work, the psychological roadmap to help you move through separation with clarity, integrity, and resilience. In today's episode, which is part 1 of the 4-part series, we're talking about the quiet, often painful turning point when you begin to realize this relationship isn't working anymore. Sometimes it's obvious, sometimes it creeps up slowly over months or years, but however it arrives, there's a moment when the denial cracks and a new truth starts whispering. And it whispers something has to change. This episode is about how to recognize that moment, how to trust it, and what to do before you act on it. Let's dive in. We're going to cover 6 different segments that attack this topic from a few different directions. In the first segment, we're going to talk about the difference between a rough patch and a relation dead end. This really is something that saddles so many people in marriages. So first, let's make something clear. Every relationship hits rough patches. It happens to everybody. Stress, illness, parenting, career pressures, they all test our connection with the other person and with our partner. But a rough patch is different from a relational dead end. So what are the indicators of a rough patch? Well, conflict exists, but both partners still show effort and curiosity. So the first one is effort and curiosity. Second, there is still some intimacy. Even if it's strained, there is still some desire and some intimacy that's occurring. There's a connectedness that is not only cognitive, but also physical. And third, communication certainly can be tense, but it's not abusive or consistently avoidant or disrespectful. There still is a level of respect and general care for the other person. So what are some indicators of relational dead end? There's a few of those as well. I've got 5 for you. Number 1, you feel emotionally numb more often than not. Number 2, there's little to no affection, warmth, or respect occurring in the nature of the day-to-day relationship. Number 3, conflict patterns have become toxic or circular. You feel like you're orbiting each other and it's a toxic orbit. Number 4, one or both of you has emotionally checked out. You're just numbed out, and you're not numbed out for a short period of time. You are in a chronic state of overwhelm and numbness. And lastly, 5th, you fantasize regularly about leaving. This is something that plays in your movie screen inside your head again and again, and you think about contingencies and you reflect on what that life may be. And again, this is not occasional passing thoughts of such. It is an ongoing replay in your mind. Many coaching clients come to me and they'll say things like, I don't even feel angry anymore. I'm just empty. I'm just numb. I'm just disconnected. That's often a signal of deep detachment, and that is certainly one of the signals of relational dead end. So how do you tap into this? And that's what we're going to jump into in this next segment. What are the inner signals that it's time to let go? What are some of the things you should be at least mindful of and looking for? And what are those internal signs that you may be outgrowing your relationship? And the most common ones I see, both as a 20-year therapist, as a clinical and forensic psychologist, as well as an executive and leadership coach, coaching high-performance people. These are the top 6 signals that I see. 1, chronic emotional fatigue. You're not just tired. It goes beyond being tired. You feel emotionally and physically drained in your partner's presence. It's like you're always walking on eggshells You always feel you have to manage their emotions or pretending to be someone that you're not. You feel an inability to be your authentic self in the relationship. So you suppress your needs and you no longer even bring up your wants or your intentions. Number two, persistent resentment. I think resentment might be the single biggest toxic trait as an indicator. Resentment is anger that feels trapped. It feels on a stranglehold. You may catch yourself replaying old fights, tallying old slights or insults, or feeling emotionally shut down in response to even small interactions. Number three is a loss of self identity. You look in the mirror and don't recognize who you are anymore. You've compromised your values, your goals, your dreams, and you've done this in ways that now feel misaligned or inauthentic. And perhaps even worse, you feel like you can't be the person you'd like to be in the presence of that partner. You can't express your true self, you can't express your feelings, or otherwise there'll be too much emotional fallout. Number four, emotional or physical disconnection. No way around this. The affection is just gone. Sex is non existent or it's mechanical at best. Conversations are about logistics and not life. At this stage, when I'm working with someone, I describe it often as you're just orbiting each other at this point. You're literally living like a roommate. You're sharing logistical challenges. How do we get the kids to camp? How do we pick people up from church? Who's getting the groceries this week? Who's cooking? Who's going to pay the school lunch bill? You're just orbiting each other, and the only connection is the logistical aspects or problems that need to be solved with your roommate that you happen to be living with. Fifth, there's an increased interest in escaping or getting away. You find yourself daydreaming about being alone, living elsewhere, or being with someone else who, quote unquote, gets you. So you might have thoughts of somebody really understands you and you desire that in your life. In some cases, you might have people in your life of the opposite sex or of the same sex, depending on what your sexual orientation is, but somebody who does get you, and you start asking your questions, even if there isn't a physical attraction, you start asking yourself questions of, why don't I have someone like this in my life? Why can't my wife or my husband or my partner be like fill in the blank, somebody who understands me? That's all part of that escapism, that tendency to want to escape your current predicament emotionally and psychologically. And sixth, under the inner signals that it's time to let go, is indifference. And indifference comes at the later stages. By the time indifference gets there, I'm not saying it cannot be revived. I will say that there are amazing things that marital therapists and even pastors and divorce coaches and separation and divorce coaches like myself, there's amazing things that we can do. But if somebody opens up to me and begins work with me and they are already at a level of deep indifference, man, this is the quiet killer. When you stop caring enough to even argue, when you don't have the energy to even fight anymore, that's a sign that the emotional investment is not only fading, but that it might be gone. Think for a minute and reflect back on a relationship you had, maybe early on, maybe high school, maybe college, maybe young adulthood. And think about someone you really loved, you really cared about, and you had a hard time at the breakup. When was the time that you knew you were over that person? Think about that for a minute. When was the time that you knew I'm really or finally over my ex? For some of you, you might say, well, it's when I found somebody else, but I think it's more fundamental than that. You knew you were over your ex when you heard about them. Maybe you heard they were dating. Maybe you heard they fell in love. Maybe you heard they got engaged and you just didn't care. It wasn't that you wished them ill will, but it just didn't bother you. You were just indifferent. You were neutral to that. When that occurs, you know you are over your ex. If that is happening in your marriage, that is a problem. That is the quiet killer. So we've talked now about the difference between a rough patch and a relational dead end. I talked about six of the most common signals that it's time to let go that I find in both my therapy, but especially a lot more in my coaching practice nowadays. But this begs the question of why do we stay so long? I was in a marriage for 17 years. I have a wonderful relationship with my ex. We co parent like rock stars. I wish her the best. She wishes me the best. She has met my girlfriend. I have met her boyfriend. We are very appreciative of each other's new partners. We are not the norm. We actually signed our divorce papers together in front of a notary that ironically said, I sign hundreds of these a year, and almost never does a couple come in and sign it together, let alone be laughing with each other and joking with each other. So I'm a living proof that you can navigate separation and divorce amicably, and even in a way that you're thriving, even in a way that you're closer than you were during the marriage. But I bring all of this up now because I'm also one that stayed for 17 years. And it wasn't bad for all 17 years. And I'm not going to do a full forensic analysis on my marriage. That's just not the focus today. And I wouldn't want to do that without permission of my ex, because obviously she's part of that analysis. But what I will say is I did stay. And I stayed and she stayed for longer than we probably would have if the insights came to us quicker. We had problems for a number of years that we navigated through, and we decided in the end that we were better separate. But we also saw these signs. The signs that I just shared with you, I saw those. I don't know if I always admitted them, but I saw them. So the question is, even when we see the signs, why do many of us stay? Well, one of the main reasons, or several reasons, I should say, are fear, guilt, ambiguity, hope, and social pressure. So the fear of what's on the other side. Will I be lonely for the rest of my life? Will the kids be okay? Will my partner be okay? Will my wife be okay? My husband be okay? Right? A sense of guilt. And that might be wrapped up in religious beliefs. It might be wrapped up in a sense of duty. It might be wrapped up in care for the kids and the perceived or assumed negative impact of divorce. Number of reasons we might feel guilt. Ambiguity. And ambiguity was something that I was in for a long while, of just not knowing, should I stay? Should I go? Might this get better? Might not. I don't want to rush and leave and put damage on the children or undue damage to my ex, at the time my wife. There's ambiguity involved of not having a clear picture, not having clarity. That's one of the things that coaching can help a lot on, is getting clarity of your wants, your needs, and your non-negotiables as it applies, and then helping you understand the why question. Why do you stay? Why do you want to leave? And sorting that out. The other is hope. Many times we still have hope for the future. We have hope that things are going to turn around, right? And we've seen in many of your lives, but many lives of people you may know, where that hope translates to some external project. Let's build that new house. Let's have that next child. Let's buy that vacation home. Let's do that expensive trip to Europe. As if these things and the excitement and the challenge and the newness that they bring is somehow going to instill newness and challenge and healing into the relationship. And all too often, those things don't fix the real problem. And lastly, social pressure, right? There's financial incentives to stay. There's social incentives to stay. I have been both surprised and not surprised at the friends and how my friends have responded to my divorce. There have been many friends that I've been pleasantly surprised. They have responded very well. They've embraced me. They've embraced my ex. They have not chose sides, and they've embraced our new partners. And again, pleasantly surprised, and I love them for it. I've also seen very close friends, even particularly a best friend of my wife and mine, who absolutely ghosted me not even after the divorce, after the separation, almost immediately. They just ghosted me. They stopped reaching out. They stopped calling. They were not responding to my attempts to engage. And after a while, I gave up. So social pressure is another one that can certainly impact the reason why we hang in there and we stay so long. All of these are potential mental traps, and you need to be mindful of them. So here are the most common mental traps. And the first is a statement, I can't do this to the kids. It's one of the biggest reasons people stay in unhappy marriages. But here's the real hard truth. Studies show that kids suffer more from living in a high conflict or emotionally dead household than from co-parenting in peace. That's so important to know. There's clear research that kids suffer from living in a high conflict or emotionally dead household than from co-parenting in peace. So I'm going to say it the way I often say it in other social media content I put out, and I say it to all my coaching clients on this topic. Divorce doesn't hurt your kids. Divorcing badly hurts your kids. I'm going to say that again. Divorce does not hurt your kids. It's divorcing badly that hurt your kids. I'm not saying that divorce, even if it's done well, doesn't have an impact. Just like losing a pet, losing a loved one, losing a grandfather, losing a childhood friend. These all have impacts. These are all grieving processes. But what happens over time is people absorb the blow, and children will absorb the blow if that separation is done in as amicable a process as possible. Staying together in a highly conflictual relationship, or one which is the opposite, emotionally dead, with no emotionality, no intimacy, no sharing of affection, no respect, you're setting up years of modeling for your children to go into the same relationship and assume, well, shit, this is just how marriage is. That's the real damaging thing. And I will sing that to the cows come home, and I will debate anybody on that. The second common mental trap is it's not that bad. No one's marriage is perfect, but this isn't that bad. And absolutely nobody's marriage is perfect. And there are ups and downs. But the problem is when we adopt the it's not that bad mentality, you end up minimizing your pain and you end up subjugating your needs and your wants by rationalizing it away. You tell yourself others have it worse. And yes, others may have it worse. And at any given time, no matter where you are in your life, you could probably find somebody that has it worse. And of course, you could find somebody that has it better. But none of that matters because you are living your life. It is your life. And as far as we know, as far as I know, we only get one turn around the globe here. Not one turn around the globe, but we get one life here, regardless of your religious beliefs and whatever they may be, and no disrespect of what you believe. All I know is this might be my last turn at life. I need to live it to my fullest. So the trap of it's not that bad can be really debilitating. Another trap is this one. What if I regret it? What if I leave and then I regret it and I realize I was wrong? Regret is normal. This is a gigantic decision. Deciding on who you marry is probably the single biggest decision in your life. And there's a lot of research to back up that not only is it the biggest decision emotionally and psychologically, it's one of the biggest decisions in terms of your career success and your financial success. So regret is normal, but staying in something harmful for fear of regret is like staying in a burning house because it used to feel like home. And if you leave, you're going to miss home. But if it's burning down, you've got to ask, what is the cost of staying here? What is the cost of staying in this burning home? And then the last common mental trap is more of that social pressure. What will people think? This often has high religious overtones. What will people at my church think? What will people at my synagogue think? What will people at work think? Just what will my neighbors think, right? This is real, and it's a big pressure, and it's genuine. And it's okay if you feel it, especially in tight-knit communities or professional circles. But remember that your peace must matter more than public opinion. The peace you have, your ability to live authentically, your ability to feel like you're getting your needs met, your basic needs met, and hopefully your wants as well, that, as well as your peace, has to mean more to you than public opinion. So we've now talked through the reasons and the mental traps of why people stay so long. It's probably a good time to pivot to talk about the psychology of ambiguous loss. I mentioned ambiguity, and I mentioned that it's one of the biggest reasons that people stay, not just stay, people stay for guilt and fear and social pressure. But one of the reasons people stay much longer than they should, and what I mean by that is after the divorce, they say, yeah, I should have left 3 years ago. I should have left 5 years ago. I should have left 8 years ago. The biggest reason that people stay over time, even when they know the signs that we opened with, it's the psychology of ambiguous loss. And it's a concept that I often share with clients. And it's coined by Dr. Pauline Boss. It refers to the grief we experience when something or someone is psychologically absent, but physically present. So they're still in our orbit, but they feel checked out. We don't feel, so it's the concept of I may not be alone because I'm with you every night, but I'm still tremendously lonely. In the context of a relationship, you live together, but you feel alone. You speak daily, but never talk meaningfully or soulfully. You're married, but you're not emotionally connected. I remember a number of years, and this was a good 4 or 5 years before my divorce. I was working on a train table in around Christmas time for the kids. And I was working on it every night after work till like 9 or 10 at night, um, in the garage. And I remember distinctly at that time for days on end that I'd be out there working on this and I would just feel so alone. I enjoyed working on the table for the kids. I was excited about it, but I was doing this activity and I just wasn't doing it in partnership with my wife at the time. And I'm not blaming her. She was not a tools person. She wasn't the kind of person that did crafts. She wasn't the kind of person that worked in the garage. So I'm not judging, but I'm really just sharing that my experience of how I just felt like I was on an island doing these things by myself. And I know there were times that she felt the same. So this kind of loss, it's kind of hard to name. And it's even harder to grieve. And it's hard to grieve because on the surface, everything looks fine. You go to the dinner parties in the neighborhood, you go to the wine tastings, you go and sit at the soccer field next to each other, and everybody looks and says, "Oh, there's George and his wife, and they look fine. They look great. Everything's fine on the surface." But internally, you're mourning the absence of aliveness, of intimacy, and of meaning. And naming this kind of grief, this ambiguous loss, is the first step to healing. You don't need your partner to validate it. Your pain is valid because you feel it. So naming it and owning it is the first step because it's first being aware of it and coming to awareness about it. And only then can you then move in a direction of doing something about it. Whether it means let's heal the relationship and fix it so we're no longer orbiting each other and we're connected, or it might mean let's go our separate ways if that's the direction that needs to happen. So where do we go from here? How do we start turning this corner? How do we bring a sense of power and ownership and agency back to you if you're feeling these things now? And it really comes down to the power of owning what your truth is and how difficult that is. Before I go into this, I just want to add one other thing. One of the things I struggled with for a number of years, I had and still have, you might say, even though I'm not married anymore, very loving in-laws. They're great people. They're wonderful people. They've always been supportive. They're also quite religious. And one of the things of owning the truth that my ex and I struggled with is how do you break it to the family when they have such strong views of marriage and some of those views are seated in religious overtones. And at some point, we had to come to terms in our own marital counseling of owning our own truth, owning that this is our experience, it's our truth, and we have to live the life as best we feel, not what anyone else thinks. So before you have any major conversations, before you contact an attorney or move out of the house, there is an essential first step that I highly recommend. And again, I do this with all of my coaching clients. And it really is, first step is own your own truth. Own it. Even privately if you have to, but you need to own it. Speak to yourself in the mirror, write it in a journal, say it out loud to a therapist, a coach, or even a trusted friend or a pastor, somebody that you trust. But you need to own your own truth and own your needs, your wants, and your non-negotiables. And you have to be clear on that. Because if you are ignoring those, if you are watering those down, if you are stifling those, then you can't be fully present for yourself, which means you cannot be fully present for others. So here's some examples of what I mean there. I'm not happy and I haven't been for a long time. I'm trying harder than my partner is. I feel more alive when I'm away from them or away from home. I've changed and the relationship hasn't. Or I've grown and my partner hasn't. Remember that if you heal and they don't, over time, you are separating the bond that kept you together. You are separating the hurt, painful trauma bond that might have joined you to begin with. So as you heal and they don't, or you might be on the reverse side of it, your partner's healing and you're not doing the work. What happens over time is that connection, that rubber band gets spread further and further and further, and eventually it breaks because they are growing into a new version of themselves and you're not keeping pace. It doesn't mean you have to grow exactly the same way, but you got to stay within pace of them. Think of it like a marathon. You don't have to be winning, but you want to be within eyesight, within pace. That's how relationships work. It's like an orbit, right? I mentioned orbit several times. Think of an orbit, two celestial bodies. If they get too far from each other, the pull together, the gravity together dissipates so much that they fly off into space in different directions. That orbit has to keep a pull so you are within orbit and staying connected. I know I used orbit earlier as a negative thing, meaning that's all you're doing. Here I'm using it in terms of the connectivity. And this isn't about blame here. It's about clarity. It is about clarity because you cannot make healthy decisions from a place of denial or self-abandonment. You just can't. You have to get honest with yourself before you can get honest with anyone else. So again, the fifth segment here is the power of owning your truth. So let's say you've done some of that work. You've started to come to terms with your own truth. You've started to come to terms with your wants, your needs, and your non-negotiables. What do you do next? Before you do anything drastic. If you're resonating with this episode, you may be tempted to act immediately, right? You might feel like, oh, George is nailing it. I feel all this. I'm going to go file divorce tomorrow. No, don't do that. And I'll explain why. This is a stage that calls for internal action, not external reaction. Let me share that again. This is a stage of the process that calls for internal action, not external reaction. So here's what I recommend. There's 5 tips here. First, get still. Get still, S-T-I-L-L. Create space for your truth to land. Go for walks, meditate, journal, mute the noise, mute the distractions. In some cases, you might need to stop listening to loved ones because one thing you're going to find, everybody and their fucking brother and mother and the toilet and the frickin' kitchen sink all have opinions about what you should be doing with your marriage. You should stay. You should give it up to God. You should divorce. You should leave her. You should run away. You should move to Belize, right? There's going to be a million frickin' opinions. It's going to be really hard to get clarity in your own brain, in your own mind, in your own heart with all that white noise. So mute the noise. Number 2, seek confidential support. Talk to a therapist, a coach, a clergy member you trust. Don't go it alone. Now you might wonder, well, George, you just said, ignore all that. I'm not saying ignore all that. Find confidential, and this is key. This is so freaking key, what I'm about to say. Confidential, but also, and here's the key part, objective support. This is not a time to have your best childhood friend get all dramatic with you and talk you up into, oh, you should leave him and screw that, and you should leave her and to hell with her. You need somebody that has an objective, balanced perspective. A therapist, a coach, a clergy member, all of these, and you may have loved ones, you may have family members that can bring that objectivity and see it from both sides. That's what you need. Third, avoid big announcements. Don't tell the kids or make impulsive declarations to your partner yet. You're still gathering clarity. You don't know what the play is yet. You don't know what your move is yet because you don't have clarity. And by the way, for some of you that have anxiety, some of you that have ADHD, this is going to be a freaking uncomfortable place to be because you don't like to sit with difficult emotion. So you need to sit with that and wait for clarity and do the work, right? Again, journaling, meditating, going for walks. Give it time. Get clear on what your wants, needs, and non-negotiables are. Allow clarity to rise to the surface. Some of you are going to want to rush in to make a decision because you don't like the ambiguity. Sit with it. Sit with it. Number 4, document your feelings. Keep a written record of your emotions, of your needs, your realizations, your insights. It will help you track patterns and stay grounded if things escalate later. And by the way, this goes in both directions. You're going to get nostalgic, by the way. There's going to be moments you're going to see old pictures of the kids. You're going to see that ski trip you took to Aspen. You're going to see that trip you took to Cancun. You're going to get nostalgic, and that's going to pull you back in. And often for a while, you're going to forget all the bullshit, all the things you weren't getting out of the relationship, all the needs you weren't getting met. And the flip can happen as well. you're seeing some of the more recent stress patterns, right? Some of the arguing, some of the neglect, some of the disrespect, and you're going to forget of all the positives that you may have in the relationship. So document these things, right? So you understand, again, objectively, it's almost like taking a ledger, putting down on a ledger both the good and the bad. And so when things get better for a while or get worse or nostalgia kicks in, you could look back and have a sense of this. For a while, and what kept me in it so long was a lot of the nostalgia, and it was hope, and it was fear. And I had to remind myself at times about the things that I've been very, very open and honest about and still weren't changing for the better. And I was not getting needs met. And I was really unhappy. And I knew that I was going to stay unhappy. And it was finally at a point where we both mutually knew that we just grew apart. We really became different people. And in a way that we were no longer each other's person. But documenting my feelings and my thoughts throughout that process is like having an anchor that helps you stay grounded and tethered. You're not imbalanced. Number 5, under what to do next, start building internal resilience. Remember that this is a marathon. It is not a sprint. If you're doing it right, it's going to be a marathon. It's going to be a process that takes time for you to get clarity. And if that clarity means you're going to work things out, that healing, that reconnection isn't going to happen overnight. That will take a while. If you're going your separate ways, that also will take a while. And it's going to take time for you to heal and grow and come out the other side. And it's going to take time for your ex to do the same. And if you have kids, it'll take time as well for them. You'll need tools to do this, not just courage. And here is where coaching with the right coach can really help, because it gives you the tools and the focus. And therapy also can help. It all depends between the two, what you need, but both are really good places where you can get the psychological and emotional tools that you need. Okay. Let me now give you some closing reflections. We talked about the difference between a rough patch and a relational dead end. We talked about the inner signals that it's time to let go. We talked about why we stay too long. What are the reasons and the pressures that keep us in there longer than maybe we should be? And then we talked about the psychology of ambiguous loss, when something or someone is psychologically absent, but physically still there, and how difficult that is. Because if they're gone physically, they're gone. Then at some logical level, you're not expecting them to give you anything. But when they're there every night in bed, when they're there every night at the dinner table, when they're there every morning brushing their teeth next to you, it's hard to not expect anything from them because you're still in it, right? So the psychology of ambiguous loss. And then we turned to the power of owning your truth, that you have to get clarity because you can't make healthy decisions from a place of denial or self-abandonment. And lastly, what to do next before you do anything drastic. So let me leave you with this. There is no shame in outgrowing a relationship. There is no weakness in wanting more for your life. And there is no guilt in choosing your aliveness and your peace over emotional survival. And that is probably the most profound message you can give to your children, that you are choosing your peace and your happiness over an unhealthy and unhappy situation. And you don't want to give them a model of an unhealthy relationship that they take into adulthood. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is admit, I'm not okay here and I deserve more. Keep that in mind as you navigate. These are not easy decisions, and this is not an easy process, but there is hope on the other side. There is a rainbow at the end of the storm if you do the work, and the inner work takes time, and it is not always easy. So next week, as part of the 4-part series, I'm going to explore what it looks like to separate without creating chaos. How do you separate amicably? How to navigate that first hard conversation, set healthy boundaries, and begin the emotional transition with dignity. If you know someone who needs this episode, please share it. And if you're in the thick of it right now, take a deep breath. You're not alone. There is a process to go through, and you will come out the other side. All right. This is the Unstressed Exec. I'm Dr. George Vergolius. Remember, insight without action changes nothing. If you're ready to turn awareness into movement and stress into strategy, coaching can be the catalyst. Coaching will change you. Reach out to set up a free consultation. You can find me at www.theunstressedexec.com or on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube as The Unstressed Exec. Let's create real momentum starting now. Until next time, I'm Dr. George Vergolius, The Unstressed Exec. Thanks for listening. See you next time. And remember, shift happens.